The air was thick with tension the day everything changed. I had no idea that my life, my carefully built empire, would be thrown into chaos by a woman who was supposed to be family. But there she was, standing across the boardroom table, her sharp eyes locked onto mine like a hawk stalking its prey. She didn't even need to say a word. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the cold determination in her every gesture. The truth was, she'd been planning this for months, and now she was finally ready to execute her masterstroke. My mother-in-law, Donna Prescott, was making her move to take control of Prescott Enterprises, my $300 million company. I had built this business from the ground up, starting in my 20s with a tiny startup that nobody believed in. It had taken years of grueling work, endless nights, and sacrifices no one would understand. But I made it, through sheer grit and determination. Now, at 38, I was at the helm of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, with a loyal team, a burgeoning reputation, and more than enough resources to keep pushing the boundaries of innovation. And then there was Donna, the woman who had been the perfect picture of charm and grace when I'd first married her son, James. But as the years passed, her smile grew colder. Behind that mask, Donna wasn't just my mother-in-law. She was a power-hungry manipulator, with eyes always on the prize. It wasn't just my company she wanted. It was the control, the influence, the wealth. Everything that came with the empire I had built. I'd never expected her to come after me like this. But I knew, deep down, I had to fight back. There was no way I was going to let her take what was mine. What she didn't know, though, was that I had a plan, a secret one, that would turn this whole situation on its head. And by the end of it, I would come out on top. But first, I had to outsmart the one woman I had underestimated for far too long. I hadn't always seen Donna as a threat. When I first met her, she seemed like the perfect mother-in-law, supportive, caring, and genuinely interested in my career. At first, I couldn't help but be charmed by her sophistication, the way she glided into any room with the grace of a queen. She would speak with such eloquence, offering advice and insight, always making me feel as if I had someone truly looking out for my best interests. She'd always be at family dinners, telling stories about the old days, sharing tales of how things used to be. I was naive, thinking that her experience and presence would be a gift, something that could help me navigate the complex world of high-stakes business. She'd often tell me how proud she was of me, how much she admired the empire I had built. But it didn't take long for me to realize that beneath that polished exterior, there was something much darker simmering below the surface. The first time I noticed the shift was when I made a significant move in the business world, securing a deal with a global tech giant that could catapult Prescott Enterprises to the next level. It was a huge victory, and I was on top of the world, convinced that nothing could stand in my way. The moment I shared the news with Donna, I could see the shift in her eyes. There was no congratulatory hug, no proud smile. Instead, there was something far colder, more calculating. She didn't even bother to hide it. The silence between us stretched on like a thick fog, and I felt the weight of her disapproval pressing down on me. "You think this deal will make you untouchable?" she'd said, her voice cool, as if she were speaking to a child. I tried to brush it off, but the doubt lingered in my mind. That was the first moment when I began to question her intentions. Looking back, I realized now that she was already plotting her next move. Donna had always been like a chess player, always thinking several moves ahead, and she had me in her sights. The real trouble started when James, my husband, began to grow more distant. He was supportive of me, but over time, I noticed how he would side with his mother on business decisions, even when I felt her advice was misguided. At first, I told myself it was just family loyalty. But then I noticed something unsettling. James had started to defer to Donna on matters that should have been mine to decide. She had a way of manipulating him, using guilt and old family ties to sway him. It wasn't just her. There were others in our circle, investors and advisors, who seemed to be leaning toward Donna's influence, too. There were murmurs, whispers, things I couldn't fully place, but they were there, simmering under the surface. "I think it's time we start bringing in some outside consultants," Donna had suggested at one of our family meetings. Someone who understands the bigger picture, someone who can guide the company to a more stable future. I had been in this business long enough to know what that meant. It wasn't about stability, it was about control. She wanted a seat at the table, not just as a well-meaning mother-in-law, but as an executive, a key player in the decisions that could make or break Prescott Enterprises. Her subtle jabs at my leadership became more frequent, her suggestions more pointed, her advice more intrusive. And the worst part was, James was listening to her. I confronted him one night after a particularly tense dinner. The conversation had started innocuously enough, with talk of our son's school play and the latest family news. But the moment Donna left, the tension between us grew palpable. I could feel it in the air, the strain in our marriage that had been building for months. "I don't like what's happening with your mom," I said, my voice low but firm. "She's trying to take over the company, James. I can see it. You have to stop siding with her." James looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "She's just trying to help." "Help? By taking my place?" I said, my voice rising. "She's been undermining everything I've built, and you're just letting her." James stood up, rubbing his temples as though this was all too much for him to process. "You're overreacting. Mom's just looking out for the company. She's been in this world longer than both of us combined. You should listen to her more." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. This wasn't about business advice. This was about power, and I wasn't willing to let Donna Prescott take what was mine. "I don't need her help, James. I don't need her advice, her interference, or her schemes. And I sure as hell don't need her pulling you away from me." He didn't say anything for a long while, and the silence between us stretched longer than it should have. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping in exhaustion. "You don't understand, Anna. She's my mother. I have to consider what she says." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for my marriage, for my place in this family, and for everything I had worked so hard to build. Donna's manipulation of James was a quiet but insidious part of the battle, a weapon she used to weaken my position. And the worst part was, I couldn't figure out if he was complicit or just oblivious to her schemes. But the tension didn't end there. Donna's influence began to creep into the boardroom, with her subtle yet constant suggestions and power plays. She would show up at meetings uninvited, offering advice on hiring, firing, and, most dangerously, financial decisions. And every time I pushed back, she would smile, that same cold smile, and say, "I'm just trying to make sure the company survives. You know how hard the market is right now. Maybe you should consider a change in leadership." I could feel the walls closing in. The more Donna made her move, the more I realized just how deep her reach was. It wasn't just my husband I was fighting. It was the very foundation of everything I had built. She wanted control, and she was using everything, family, influence, and her subtle tactics to get it. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't about to give up without a fight. I had built Prescott Enterprises from nothing. And while she may have thought she could easily take it from me, she was sorely mistaken. What Donna didn't realize was that I had a secret plan, one that would outsmart her at every turn. And once I set it in motion, there would be no going back. The game was about to change. The tension between Donna and me continued to escalate, and I could feel the weight of her schemes bearing down on me with every passing day. The more she pushed, the more I dug in my heels. I knew this battle wouldn't be won with just words. It would take something more. Something that would force her to see that I wasn't going to roll over and let her take over my company, my life. The moment she started making public moves, like hiring her own team of financial consultants and making suggestions at board meetings, it became clear that I had to act fast. But I couldn't show my hand. Not yet. Not when Donna was so confidently playing her cards, thinking she had me backed into a corner. She didn't realize that I had one of my own waiting. It all started when I hired a private investigator. My first instinct was to find dirt, something I could use against her. I was tired of fighting with her at every turn, and I knew that if I could uncover some hidden skeletons, it might give me the leverage I so desperately needed. But what I uncovered wasn't what I expected. Donna wasn't the one with skeletons in her closet. Her real weapon was in plain sight, her connections. The investigator had traced Donna's movements, her meetings, and her contacts, and what I found was chilling. She wasn't just networking with influential people in business. She was building a coalition, a silent army of powerful investors, high-level executives, and even politicians, all with one goal: to wrestle control of Prescott Enterprises from me. She had been preparing this for months, maybe even years. I couldn't even imagine how many people were already in her pocket, how deep her influence ran. The problem wasn't just her ambition, it was the fact that she had the resources to make her ambitions a reality. She had been working in the shadows, quietly laying the groundwork to take what I had fought so hard to build. But what truly shocked me was the level of manipulation. It wasn't just about money, it was personal. Donna had been working on my husband behind my back, weaving her web of influence to make him see things her way. The investigator had uncovered emails, phone calls, and meetings between James and some of the people on Donna's payroll. He wasn't just unaware of her maneuvers, he was a willing participant, his loyalty to his mother blinding him to the damage she was causing. In one particularly damning exchange, James had been asked by a high-powered investor to keep me distracted while Donna made her moves, and he'd agreed. The pain that shot through me upon reading that email was almost unbearable. My husband, the man I had built my life with, was complicit in the very thing I feared the most. I had always suspected that Donna's influence on him was more than just maternal guidance, but seeing it in black and white, seeing the betrayal, was a gut punch. It wasn't just the business I had to fight for now, it was my marriage. The question gnawed at me: was James truly on her side, or was he simply being manipulated? The investigator's findings didn't offer a clear answer, but they left me with more questions than ever. Could I trust him? Could I continue to fight for my company while fighting for our relationship? It was a hard choice to make, but I knew that no matter what, I had to focus on the company first. Without Prescott Enterprises, everything else would fall apart. So I buried the hurt, putting my energy into planning my next move. And it wasn't going to be easy. I knew I couldn't confront Donna directly, not yet. She was too smart, too calculating. But I had an idea. If she was building her network in the shadows, then I needed to make some moves of my own, strategic, silent moves that would keep me one step ahead. My first course of action was to reach out to some of the key people who had supported me when I first started Prescott Enterprises. I knew I needed to reestablish loyalty, to remind the investors and board members why they had put their faith in me and not in Donna. I arranged private meetings with some of them, people I trusted, people who had been with me through thick and thin. The goal was simple: to solidify my position and strengthen my hold on the company, making sure that Donna's influence would be met with resistance. One by one, I met with the most influential figures, working to remind them of everything we had accomplished together. I talked about our values, the vision I had for the company, and the road ahead. I asked for their support, and slowly, one meeting at a time, I built a wall of allies that Donna would have to contend with. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed to make sure my position was rock solid. So I took the next step. I started looking for ways to play Donna's game, but on my own terms. I knew she would be looking for ways to challenge my authority at board meetings, so I began to stack the meetings with more allies. I arranged to have certain decisions, key financial decisions, scheduled for vote when some of her supporters were out of town. I arranged behind-the-scenes meetings with other investors who could ensure the votes went in my favor. My goal wasn't to play dirty, it was to level the playing field, to keep Donna from making any major moves without facing strong opposition. Meanwhile, James remained distant. Every time I tried to talk to him about the business, he'd retreat into a shell of silence, deflecting and downplaying the tension between us. It was as though he couldn't even see the damage his mother was causing to our family and our business. But deep down, I knew he was struggling, torn between his loyalty to me and his sense of duty to his family. And yet, every time he chose Donna's side, it felt like another crack in our foundation. I couldn't tell him what I had discovered, not yet. I had to be careful. If I showed him the full extent of what I knew about his involvement, it could destroy whatever was left of our relationship. So, I played the waiting game, biding my time until I could come up with a way to present the truth without losing everything. But Donna was getting bolder, and her maneuvers were growing more obvious. She began calling emergency meetings, citing her concerns about the company's future. She would parade around, acting as though she had the company's best interests at heart, and all the while, I could feel her eyes on the prize, my seat at the table, my position of power. It was all part of her grand plan. The pressure was mounting. Every day, it felt like I was walking on a razor's edge. But there was one thing Donna didn't know. She didn't know that I had already planned my counterattack, something that would expose her for the power-hungry schemer she truly was. I wasn't going to sit back and let her steal my company, my family, my life. Not when I had worked so hard to get here. Not when I had already sacrificed so much. The game was about to change, and I was ready. It was time to turn the tables. I had a secret plan of my own, one that would make sure Donna Prescott never had the chance to take what was mine. And this time, I was going to play for keeps. The day of the board meeting arrived, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had prepared for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare me for the storm that was about to hit. Donna had no idea what was coming, and I was determined to make sure that this would be the final time she would ever dare to undermine me. I had kept my secret plan close to the vest, only sharing bits and pieces with a trusted few. My first move was securing the majority vote. Over the past weeks, I had carefully maneuvered to gain the support of key investors and board members. But that wasn't all. I had also hired a corporate lawyer, someone with an impeccable reputation in handling hostile takeovers, just in case things escalated beyond a simple vote. The meeting was set in the company's sleek, glass-walled boardroom, a place that had always felt like home to me, where important decisions had been made, where my future had been shaped. But today, it felt like a battlefield. As the executives filtered into the room, I could already sense the tension. Donna was seated at the head of the table, her icy smile on display, acting as if this was just another day at the office. But I knew better. She could pretend all she wanted, but I knew she was fighting for control. I walked into the room with purpose, meeting the gaze of the room. Every member of the board was present, and I could see the mix of curiosity and unease in their eyes. Some of them were loyal to me. Others, I knew, had already been swayed by Donna's quiet persuasion. The room quieted as I took my seat. Donna wasted no time. I've called this emergency meeting because it's become clear that there are significant challenges to Prescott Enterprises' future, she said, her voice smooth, measured. She turned her eyes to me, like a lioness sizing up its prey. It's time to consider some drastic changes, starting with leadership. The word stung, but I kept my composure. I wasn't about to let her get to me now. Of course, I said calmly, looking around at the others in the room. But before we make any decisions about leadership, let's take a moment to discuss the real issues. Let's talk about trust, about transparency. Because, Donna, I have a feeling some of us here haven't been entirely honest with each other. Donna's eyes narrowed, but she kept her smile, though it no longer seemed as confident as it had moments before. She could sense the shift, but she had no idea how much I knew. "You'll have your chance to speak, Anna," she replied, her tone colder now. "But first, I want to present my proposal for moving forward." She slid a document across the table. It was a formal proposal, one that called for sweeping changes, most notably, the removal of me as CEO. Donna had spent weeks building her case, gathering support for this very moment. She wanted me gone, and her allies in the room were eager to see her succeed. I let her finish her presentation, all the while keeping my face impassive. She talked about restructuring, about improving the company's efficiency, as though she truly cared about the future of Prescott Enterprises. But I could see through the veil. This wasn't about efficiency, it was about power. It was about taking control of what I had built, and she wasn't going to get away with it. When Donna finished, I waited for the room to quiet. I looked around at the faces of the board members, some uncertain, some already with their hands poised to vote in Donna's favor. And that's when I made my move. "I'm sure we've all been thinking about this proposal, and I'm sure we all have our thoughts," I said, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "But before we vote, I think we should all take a moment to consider something important. Because there's something you all need to know. I paused, letting the tension build. Donna's calm demeanor had slipped, and I could see her tightening in her seat, already sensing something was off. She couldn't hide her growing unease. "I've spent the last several weeks working with legal teams and investigators," I continued, my voice steady but resolute. "And it turns out there are some important details missing from Donna's proposal. You see, while Donna's been preparing her takeover, she's been making some questionable decisions, ones that might not be in the best interests of this company. I've come to learn that she's been making backroom deals with investors, making promises that could jeopardize the company's integrity, and even going behind my back to secure votes in her favor." The room fell deathly silent. Donna's face drained of color, her usual composure cracking for the first time. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "I've gathered the evidence," I said, pulling out a folder filled with printed documents and placing them on the table. "Emails, contracts, and even recorded meetings. I've seen it all. The lengths she's gone to in order to seize control of this company. And I've made sure that those who support me will continue to do so, no matter what happens here today." Donna's eyes darted from the evidence to the faces around the room. I could see her calculations, her mind working overtime to figure out how to salvage this. But it was too late. The room had already started to shift. The board members who had once been loyal to her were now looking uncertain, glancing at one another, whispering amongst themselves. They were seeing Donna for what she truly was, an opportunist who had been using their trust to further her own agenda. Donna slammed her fist on the table, her composure shattered. "This is preposterous," she snapped. "You think you can just throw these accusations around and expect to be taken seriously?" "I don't need to throw accusations around," I replied, meeting her gaze squarely. "The evidence speaks for itself." At that moment, the door to the boardroom opened, and my corporate lawyer entered, a calm presence in the storm. He had been discreetly monitoring the proceedings, waiting for the right moment to step in. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I have the legal documents necessary to void the deals Donna has been negotiating. It's clear she's been acting in bad faith, and these actions go against the company's bylaws." Donna's face turned an ashen shade of white. She had underestimated me, just like she had underestimated my resolve. The room erupted into quiet murmurs, and one by one, board members began to turn away from Donna's proposal. The tide had shifted. It was over. "Enough," I said, standing up. "This meeting is adjourned." I had won. Not just the company, but my dignity, my future, and my place in the world. Donna was outmaneuvered, exposed, and defeated. The storm had passed, and Prescott Enterprises was mine to lead once again. But the real victory wasn't in the boardroom. It was in the strength I found within myself, the courage to fight back, and the realization that no one, not even family, could take away what I had worked so hard to build. As I left the room, I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over me. The battle was over, but I knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter for Prescott Enterprises and for me. The days following the board meeting were a blur of press releases, legal battles, and careful recalibrations. The fight with Donna had left its mark on Prescott Enterprises, but it also cemented my place as the unchallenged leader of the company. With her plot exposed and her influence stripped away, I had regained control, but I knew the aftermath would be complex, not just in the boardroom, but in my personal life as well. Donna had been removed from the company's leadership, her involvement with Prescott Enterprises terminated. Her carefully orchestrated network of investors had crumbled under the weight of the evidence I presented, and the few that remained loyal to her had been ousted. A sense of calm slowly settled over the company, but it was a fragile calm. There were still many decisions to be made about the future direction of Prescott Enterprises, and I was determined to ensure that its foundation was stronger than ever. However, it wasn't just the business that needed mending, it was my marriage. The moment I exposed Donna, I knew the real work had only just begun. I had been so focused on protecting my company, on making sure that no one would steal the hard-earned success I had built, that I had failed to recognize the toll it had taken on my relationship with James. After the board meeting, James had barely spoken to me. He'd remained silent in the wake of the chaos, refusing to confront the truths I had revealed. I understood why he was distant. He was torn. His loyalty to his mother had always been a source of strain between us, but now, seeing the full scope of her manipulation, I wasn't sure how much he would be able to come back from it. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings, I found James sitting in the study, his eyes distant, his face unreadable. He looked like a man lost, caught between two worlds. I had hoped for a confrontation, something that would allow us to air our grievances, but instead, all I could do was sit down beside him, unsure of where to begin. "James," I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of everything I had been holding in. "I know you're hurt, but I need you to understand why I did this." He looked at me, his eyes tired, as though he had been carrying a burden he couldn't release. "I don't know how to fix this, Anna," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to fix us." I sighed, the ache of everything that had happened settling deep in my chest. "I never wanted you to choose between me and your family. But what your mother did, what she was willing to do, wasn't just about business. It was about taking something that wasn't hers. And you were part of that. You didn't see it, but you were complicit, and it hurt me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to admit that she was using me. But I couldn't bring myself to go against her. And when I found out what she was really doing, I didn't know where to turn. I reached out and placed a hand on his. I know it's not easy, but we have to face it together. We have to rebuild the trust, James. I can't do this without you. And I don't want to." He nodded, his eyes filling with emotion. It was then that I realized how much we had both been changed by the events of the past few weeks. We weren't the same couple that had walked into that boardroom, blissfully unaware of the depths of Donna's manipulation. But we had the chance to rebuild, to repair what had been broken, not just between us, but within ourselves. The next few weeks were filled with difficult conversations. James and I spent time together, away from the stress of work and the complications of family. We started seeking counseling, both individually and as a couple, to try to unpack the damage done by Donna's machinations. It wasn't easy. Trust had to be earned again, and it wasn't a quick fix. But slowly, we began to reconnect, and as time went on, the wounds started to heal. As for Prescott Enterprises, the recovery was swift. With Donna gone and the power struggle behind us, the company could finally focus on its next phase of growth. I worked closely with my trusted allies to stabilize the ship and ensure the long-term health of the business. We made adjustments in leadership, sought out new partnerships, and, most importantly, reinforced the culture of transparency and loyalty that had always been the cornerstone of Prescott Enterprises. I also made it clear that this victory wasn't just about defeating Donna, it was about ensuring the company would never again fall victim to the power struggles that had almost torn it apart. I made a promise to myself that the future of Prescott Enterprises would be built on trust, integrity, and a relentless commitment to innovation. The hardest part, though, was watching Donna disappear from the narrative. It wasn't a clean break. She still tried to make moves in the background, reaching out to former investors and trying to convince them that I was a temporary solution. But her efforts became less and less significant as time passed. Prescott Enterprises was on a new path, and there was no room for the kind of divisive influence she had once wielded. As the months rolled on, the company flourished. We secured new deals, expanded into international markets, and became a symbol of resilience in the tech industry. I had fought to protect Prescott Enterprises, and in doing so, I had preserved everything I held dear: my business, my marriage, my sense of self. And when I looked back on everything that had happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt, I realized that it was all worth it. The battle had been fierce, but it had shown me who I was, what I was capable of, and that I would never let anyone take away what was mine. By the time the dust had settled, I had learned that sometimes the greatest victories don't come from defeating your enemies. They come from rebuilding, from reclaiming your place in the world, and from learning to trust again, even when it seems impossible. Prescott Enterprises wasn't just my legacy, it was my redemption, a testament to my strength and my ability to rise above the most formidable challenges. And for that, I would forever be grateful. As I stood in the heart of Prescott Enterprises, overlooking the bustling floor of our headquarters, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The weight of the battle with Donna, the emotional roller coaster that had come with it, had finally begun to lift. Prescott Enterprises was thriving, not just because we had outmaneuvered a dangerous adversary, but because we had built something even stronger in the process. My company was no longer just a symbol of success. It had become a reflection of resilience, integrity, and the power of overcoming even the most insurmountable odds. But more than that, I had rediscovered who I was, both as a leader and as a woman. The journey had taught me more than I could have ever imagined. I had always known that business was a battle, but this experience had deepened my understanding of the stakes. It had shown me that true leadership wasn't just about running a company. It was about knowing when to fight, when to hold your ground, and when to trust in yourself, even when the world around you is falling apart. And as for James, our relationship had come full circle. It hadn't been easy, and there were moments I wasn't sure we would make it. But we had fought for each other, for our marriage, and for the life we had built together. Trust, once broken, had been restored, piece by piece. We had learned to lean on each other again, and in doing so, we had rebuilt something far stronger than we had before. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but I knew one thing for sure: we were in it together. When I think back to everything that transpired, the betrayals, the victories, the painful lessons learned, I realized that it was never just about the company, or even about Donna. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of navigating the toughest challenges life had to offer. And in the end, it wasn't just my company I saved. It was my sense of self, my family, and the unshakable belief that no one could take away what was rightfully mine. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the view before me. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. The fight had shaped me, but it was the future that held the true promise of everything I had worked for. And as I opened my eyes again, I knew that nothing, no one, could ever take that away.